And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I am your host, Wes Tankersley. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching this live, if you're listening to this on the podcast, please do me a favor, do a like, share, and review. If you're watching it live, do a watch party. Help me to grow the show and reach more people. Today, my guest is Timothy McLaughlin. Timothy is an actor, director, and writer. Timothy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wes, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, hey, it's great to have you and your wonderful, glorious mustache. I know you've never heard that before, and beard.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It deserves its own Instagram account. That's right.
Yeah, you know, that might be something you could do. You could probably get a lot of followers based on that. There's a lot of people who are really growing those beards out. I just don't have the patience.
Yeah, it does take time.
Yeah. So, hey, we have different people from different walks of life on the show to kind of talk about what success is for them. You're the first actor that I've had on here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how you created that success in acting. Can you kind of just give us a rundown of kind of like who you are and where things began for you, kind of from, you know, the beginning until high school years, and then we'll talk a little bit more after that about everything else.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Connecticut, and my family moved us down to Florida in around 1978 or something like that. And then from there, I went on to high school and college at the University of Florida. I first started acting in my junior year in high school. I joined the drama club because obviously there was a hot-looking girl that I wanted to sort of get to know better. So that's usually how most guys get involved in acting.
Usually the driving force behind everything.
Yeah, exactly. You're right about that. And that went on through college, and I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at the University of Florida. And then I moved down to Orlando and started working at the Universal Studios down there, doing all their live stage shows. That snowballed and sort of grew into more work, and did a few projects in Orlando, which springboarded me on out to California. And then since I've been out here for about 22 years, it's been just a grueling process to stay relevant. You know what I'm saying? So here we are.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talked a little bit about that. Like, it's not, a lot of people often think that acting is easy. And listening to you talk about kind of, you got your fine arts degree in college, it seems like there's a lot of actors who don't actually do that. Can you talk a little bit about like how that helped you get where you are? Because I think that college is one of those things that a lot of people like were told, like, I think I'm almost 40. My parents always told me, hey, you got to go, you got to do it. You know, this is the only way you're going to be successful. Would you have done it again if you had, and how has it helped you get where you are?
Absolutely not. I can say that honestly. College was a transition, and that's usually the best way to say it. College is meant to be, in my opinion, a transition from being at home, being, how shall I say it, taken care of, and then transitioning out to being on your own and being self-sufficient. It's kind of a bridge. And depending on what you're studying, for example, I mean, obviously if you're studying engineering or law or even medical fields and business too, it's, you know, but as far as acting and fine arts, there probably was about a half a dozen classes that I really got a lot out of that I've actually carried on into the real life. It wasn't until I came out here to California that I started taking acting classes with an incredible teacher, that I really started learning the root of acting, really where it was all created and how, and it was more personalized for me as well. So, yeah, not much came out of college except for a good time, making great friends. And learning about the real world, transitioning and learning about the real world. But based on my field, I probably would have taken those 4 years and studied, you know, through a regular acting coach or an acting teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, which I feel like that's kind of one of those things. I have 2 degrees in education, and if you want to be a teacher, you have to go to college. And
Hmm.
I can say that that was probably a good mistake for me because I came from, I went to college and then I dropped out and then I went did some manual labor for 11 years and I went back to college and it was like I realized when I was done with my master's degree in teaching for 4 years that I wasn't going to be able to use that. I know that or use that and make enough money to support my family anyway. I know that
Yeah.
with acting, it's kind of one of those things where you could just pay someone to do it. And so having the degree probably helped you a little bit, but you probably could have got the same thing from just paying someone who had been
Yeah.
successful in that before. Would you say? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when I applied at Universal Studios, having that degree and that experience helped to get me position at Universal Studios. And then from there, I used what I did learn in college to sort of get into the stage shows and go from there. But as far as film and television acting, I learned almost nothing as far as film and television. The degree, the fine arts degree, was more geared towards stage production and acting, and we spent a lot of time building sets. So I can be a carpenter if I needed to be, and just basic. If I would have gone to New York, the degree I think would have really helped me because I would have tried out for Broadway and I would have worked on a lot of stage productions. And that's not to say that I didn't do a lot of stage when I got out of college. I just was more gravitated towards film and television.
So what was your first role? You mentioned that you did a lot of stage work before you went to film and television. It was in stage acting and what did you do when you first got your first role?
My first significant role in college, are you talking about? On stage
Yeah,
in
in general.
college?
I mean,
College productions?
yeah.
Yeah, I did a production. It was an adaptation of Aristophanes' The Birds, and it was a very crazy, crazy production where all the actors. It was almost they did it almost like Cats, where all of the actors portrayed different birds, and the adaptation of that was a very interesting production, to say the least. And then, of course, we did all the typical, the Shakespeare's and Chekhov's and Sam Shepard. But that was the first one I did that introduced me to a full role. I wasn't just doing like extra stuff on stage because, in theater, you did everything. You built the sets. Half the time you were an ensemble cast member. Most of the leading role characters went to the grad students, which was another, that's kind of didn't really feel comfortable when I was in college and, sitting there auditioning, knowing that the roles were going to be going to the grad students. But that's usually how it went. I mean, there were a few undergrads that broke through and were very successful on stage. But everything that happened in college was an excellent learning experience. It was something that I was able to take out there in the real world afterwards.
So you got out of college and then that turned in, you said you went to work at Universal Studios. What was your role there? What were you doing at Universal?
Well, my first role was I was actually a studio guide. And I was there for about 3 months, and then they auditioned for the Ghostbusters show. And that was a live stage performance with special effects and all kinds of great stuff. And I actually auditioned for the Rick Moranis character of Louis Tully that plays the nerdy accountant from the film. So I got casted that role. I was offered a contract, and I did about 4 or 5 years on that show. And in the interim, I was also doing shows like the horror makeup show, the Hercules and Xena show, and I actually did a show called The Barney Show, which was absolutely out of the box funny. I played the only facial character in the show because everybody was under the disguise of the characters from Barney, and I was the only guy. I played a character called Mr. Peekaboo, and he was just this off the wall, nutty old professor type of guy, and it was a lot of fun.
That's interesting. I probably had saw that some way or another. I was a little bit older than when Barney came out, but there's a lot of times where you walk into someone who had a younger sibling and they were watching that. So I'm sure I've
Yeah.
seen that at some point, but that's a great one. I mean, that was a big show, really. There was so many kids that
Yeah.
watched that show.
Yeah, massive. I
So
mean, it was massive. Yeah.
yeah. So after Universal, you end up moving over to California, and you get
hmm
kind of some roles there, right? I know there's a couple really big ones that you have, and then where did you start out with your first like TV movie acting role?
I actually that actually happened in Orlando, Florida, when I was working at Universal. I
Okay.
was actually also pursuing an acting career. My very first project was it was a low budget film, but it had a lot of nice, solid acting names attached to it. My scene was with Ed Begley Jr., and the movie was called. Um, they changed it to Student Affair, but it was called The Lay of the Land. And Ed Begley Jr. plays a college professor. I played a college student who basically went off the rails and went crazy. And the scenes were a lot of fun. But it also starred Tyne Daly and Sally Kellerman and just a lot of, really big name actors from the 70s and 80s. From there, I got cast in the miniseries for HBO called From the Earth to the Moon. That was produced by Tom Hanks. And I was very excited to do that role. And one of the episodes that I was in was directed by Frank Marshall. And from that point on, it carried over to a couple of other television roles, guest star appearances on Mortal Kombat, which at that time, back in the early 90s or mid 90s, mid to late 90s, it was a very popular show. And then I came out here. I had producers and directors from the films that I was working on telling me, say, hey, you got to get out to California. There's a lot more work to be done. So in 1999, my wife and I moved on out. And shortly thereafter, we hit a very big bump. The actor strike happened. So once the actor strike came out, I was unemployed basically for about a year. And that was one of the most difficult times of my acting career because basically I had to start all over. So that's when you learn all the trades. You learn how to paint, construction, carpentry, just whatever you can find to support your family. You have to make do. So that was a tough time.
Yeah, so you spent a year just kind of just doing side jobs to kind of get back into it. Did you start writing at that time, or when did you start writing and directing stuff? When did that come
Well,
into the play?
in 2001, I lost my father. I was very close to him. And for about a year after that, I was just in a funk. I just didn't want to do anything. So I did. I sat in front of the computer. I started writing just ideas, thoughts. And out of that came a couple of scripts. I mean, as a writer, if you're a writer, you're always writing. If you're an actor writer, you're writing and then you're acting. And so, some of the projects that I wrote, they sit in a shelf or in a closet somewhere, and you pull them back out when you want to work on them. And whether or not they ever get taken care of and written or produced, or depends on the timing of your life where you are. So during that time, which was a very difficult period, I did lots of writing, and then out of that, I started sliding myself back into acting. And my kids were little at the time; they were like 4 or 5 years old. So during the actor strike, they didn't have their union cards, so they were allowed to act. So I basically took them out on auditions and sort of kept myself in the loop of everything while the strike was going on. So,
Yeah, and that's I'm assuming pretty important to kind of keep yourself involved in that no matter what. If you knew that if the strike was going to be over at some point, you'd probably want to keep injecting yourself into that. So that's an interesting way of making that happen. Did your kids ever get in any roles or anything that were significant, or did they just kind of get some stuff here and there, or how did that work out for them?
a lot of commercial work. They were huge. They were doing a lot of commercial work. My son Matthew was in a Super Bowl commercial. My other son was doing a lot of other commercials, just from everything from Jif to supermarket commercials to um, what did he do? EDS commercial. Back then, EDS was a big company back then, and yeah, they just basically built up their college funds with all the work that they did. So that was, I mean, it was definitely a gift, and I turned to stage acting. That's when I started going back and doing some stage acting. I did a production of Neil Simon's Rumors, and a couple of other one I did a Shakespeare summer in the park kind of thing, just to stay busy and keep my tools sharpened, so to speak.
So was it tough to go back from TV to stage, or was it one of those transitions? Is like it was kind of just second nature. You already knew how to do it. TV was kind of the
Yeah.
new thing, and just kind of bouncing back and forth. Or how is that as far as like acting as a transition?
It's actually a lot easier to go from television to stage because the difference is that you don't have to you don't have to be loud when you're in front of a camera. When you're on stage, you have to project yourself. You've got to be more animated. You've got to be bigger than life. And in television and film, everything is brought down here. It's all the emotions are compacted, and you just have to be more subtle in all of your actions on camera. So it's easier. It's kind of like taking the chains off when you go back on stage. It's, you're allowed to be bigger and bolder.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that it's kind of a little bit tougher when you are not tougher, but it's easier when you have to kind of roll with the punches with having to figure out, like if you said a line wrong or something like that and you're on the stage, it's not as big as if you make a mistake on set because you have to re-record that whole thing over again. And when you make a mistake doing something live, you just kind of roll with it, right?
Yeah, and it's actually there's more adrenaline when you're on stage, in my opinion, based on my experiences. If you've ever seen the Carol Burnett show, the guys Harvey Korman and Tim Conway, they lived for going off script because there's more excitement. Now, I'm not saying that when you're doing a stage production that you go off script, because you don't, but in the event that you do miss a line, or your cast member that's playing opposite you on stage, they miss their line or they forget a line, you've got to be quicker on your feet. You have to be ready at a moment's notice to sort of start bringing a conversation back around until you get back on track with the script or the lines. And that's happened so many times out there. I mean, there's a couple of things that you cannot account for when you're on stage. And that can be anything from a lighting problem to a prop. If a prop breaks when you're on stage, you've got to improv and come up with something to justify why something happened on stage that's not normal in the script. So,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm assuming that would probably be more fun than like just kind of, just knowing that it's going to happen. It's always fun to kind of have to improvise and make that
yeah.
that reaction to whatever the situation that is going on. So the writing portion of that, can you tell us a little bit about like a writing process? So are you writing TV shows? Are you writing movies? What are you writing when you write?
Everything and anything. My writing is not restricted to a film script or a television script. For example, my first script that I wrote was a full-length feature film. Well, that's not an easy thing to do, but I did it over the course of a year. It's only been through 2 rewrites. It's going to need at least another 6 or 7 rewrites. And sometimes that process can take years, even decades sometimes, if you have something, because it evolves, it changes. I've got another script that is actually sort of like a YouTube series. It's going to consist of about 10-minute scenes or episodes. So there's a lot of, and then I've done a couple of shorts. I've written a couple of short films for the 48-hour film festivals here in LA. You have to write a script, you have to film it, you have to edit it, and you have to finish it all in 48 hours. So while it is an incredibly stressful process, it's really fun at the end, and it's really rewarding when you see it all up on stage. I mean, on the screen, rather. And it doesn't matter what I write. If I have an idea, I start creating sort of a plot, and then I start to create characters, and then you give the characters a history. And then once you give them a history, you create different experiences within that plot that sort of drive the script to a climactic moment, a resolution, and even after it's all fully written, you go back and you think to yourself, well, I want to put this actor through this struggle, or there's another character in the script that you say, okay, well, he doesn't have enough depth. I need to give him more depth. Or sometimes you take it in a different direction. I mean, I've written scripts where it starts out as a comedy and it turns into a horror, just because of the way it evolves. You know, you get ideas, you get thoughts. So yeah, it could be anything.
So how do you go about, deciding that? Do you like kind of get a couple people together and kind of act out the script that you decided, or do you just kind of read through it and then rewrite it again because it doesn't make sense? Or what's the process of deciding that it's going to turn into a horror, it's going to turn into a comedy? Because you're obviously reading through it. Do you kind of put it out in front of other people and figure out if it works, or how does that go?
I guess with almost all writers, when you're writing something, a lot of times you've got images of famous actors in your head that you want playing specific roles in your script. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Usually when I get finished or I get close to a script that's finished, I'll turn around and I'll say, hey, I'll get some friends together who I know in the acting community. And even sometimes I'll have some of my family, my wife, or we'll watch it while we read it, and we'll do a table read. And the table read is there to give us an idea of the flow of the script, where we could improve upon it, and discover what characters have a little bit of weakness to them that needs to be strengthened. So it's like a test run. And then you go back and you do more rewrites, and then you have more table reads and you have more rewrites. And then it gets to the point where you're perfectly ready to take it out there and present it to anybody that will finance it. Because that's the big, that's the big brass ring that you're reaching for, is you're reaching for somebody to finance it.
So once you get that financing, that's when the ball rolls, and then they kind of try to decide if they're going to change anything or if they're going to keep it the way it is, and then it goes into production, right? Is that kind of the process behind it?
Yeah, well, you submit it to production companies. You submit it to like Universal Studios, or there's departments within film companies, Lionsgate. I mean, those are all distributors. But the best thing to do right out of the final stages of script writing, or semi-final stages, is you find producers. You send the scripts to producers. Producers are the ones that go out and search for the money. They're the ones that have the big meetings with these big conglomerates that have all the money, and they pitch the script to them, and then they say, hey, that's a great idea. That's a great script. I'll throw in, a couple $1,000,000 from my company to help support it. And your producer also sets a budget. They're the ones that say, all right, we're going to go for $100 million on this project, or yeah, this script is a really nice script, but we're only going to go for maybe 2 or 3 million, and it'll be a low budget film. And it all depends on how much the producer believes that this film is going to be a blockbuster, or how much it's going to make money back.
When I always sit back and I think, you had mentioned that Tom Hanks had been in on one of the ones and produced it for you. The producer, after they negotiate and they get all that stuff going, do you ever see them, if you're in the film, like if you're the actor, do they take a vested interest in it, or are they just kind of the negotiator to make that happen?
Oh no, they're there all the time, especially during filming.
Okay.
Most of the time you could have anywhere from 2 to 10 to 20 producers. And sometimes there's different types of producers. There's producers, executive producers, and associate producers. And it all depends on how the film is going to be made. Sometimes, a producer will be just somebody that contributed money. We're going to give you an associate producer title because you contributed, $50,000 to the film, so you get a producer credit. And then there's the producers that are actually the bridges. They're the ones that bridge the production of the cast, the director, and they bridge it with the money people. So those are the really valuable producers. Those are the ones that basically put all the pieces together before you actually go into production. And then when you're filming, they're sitting right behind the director, and they're sitting there going, you're going over budget. We have to only one more take on this scene, or, anything that might come up, they're problem solvers. That's really the really good producers, the ones that are really attached to the film, the ones that are of the most significance, are the ones that are the problem solvers. So they're very, very important.
They're involved for sure. That's not like they're just like, hey, here's my money, now make this happen. Because you
Yeah,
always
they
see
are
like at the end
essential.
credit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they're
You
essential.
always see at the end credit, like, hey, that was produced or executive produced. Like you said, there's all these different titles. And then sometimes you see, like, it would be, like I know we were talking about Tom Hanks, but just throwing that out there, like if he was at the end credit and you didn't even know he had anything to do with it, and you're like, whoa, he wasn't in there. He didn't have anything to do with it. So it's a very good possibility that those people are standing right behind the cameraman, like you said, or behind the director.
Yeah, during the miniseries, there were other producers because, like I said, I think it was 12 or 13 episodes in the miniseries, and I was only in one episode. Although a very interesting story, my agent called me up after I had finished my episode and said, "Hey, Tom Hanks wants to see you." And I actually got called in, and I actually came into the meeting room, and I thought, first of all, I was like, okay, what did I do wrong? Am I being sued? What did I screw up on something or whatever? You're always terrified when something like that, and when you get a phone call from somebody of that kind of importance. But he actually wanted to read me for other parts in the other episodes, which was really great. So I had a great experience. I actually sat and read script with Tom in front of all the writers, and it was a great experience. He oversaw the whole project, but each episode seemed to have different producers that were obviously standing behind the directors or sitting behind the directors. I never saw Tom Hanks on the set of my episode in particular. There were other producers that were probably go-betweens. So
So you were on a couple big shows, or I might consider them big, CSI and Monk. Are those kind of the biggest projects that you had, or is there other ones that you kind of, or were your favorite projects? What kind of projects are you looking for, I guess?
well, they were big projects, but I had small roles in these films. They were just co-star roles, but nonetheless, no role for me is less important than the other roles. But I had such great experiences, especially on the episode of Monk that I did. I got to work with a tremendous actor named Alfred Molina, and he was just a phenomenal actor. And I got to talk with him a lot and find out that he's just a humble, ordinary guy. I remember sitting with him in a limousine. We were waiting to do a scene, and between takes, and I turned to him and I said, "Hey, what are you doing next? What's your next project?" And he looks at me and he says, "I don't have a clue." He says, "I'm going to be unemployed just like you." He says, and I knew that, no, Alfred Molina's got projects lined up. This guy's going to be working right when he's done. But just the humbleness that he had when he answered my question, basically saying, I'm a part-time actor. Acting is not full-time predictively. You can be a full-time actor, but when you're finished filming a project, you're unemployed until you get your next project. Now, so many actors, they just move from one project to another because they're very, A-list actors do that. But the smaller level actor, which is I consider myself to be in that category right now. I haven't reached superstar status, but they do. They sit there and they as soon as they're done, or they're even on the set of their film going, "Hey, when is my next audition?" They're on the phone with their agent. Do I got something coming up next week? I really need to get back on the saddle, and I need another project. So they're constantly working for that next job.
Well, and I'm assuming that you don't get paid probably until the job is done. I might be wrong. I mean, can you kind of tell us how pay works for actors? Because I know that there's like residuals, like you can get those based on how many times someone watches the show and things like that. But do they often get paid by week basis? Do they get paid when the filming is done? Because I mean, that could be really tough having to learn how to budget that way. I myself I'm a commission salesman, so my income changes, every 2 weeks. It could be $100, it could be a couple $1,000, depending on how hard I work and what I sell. And that's kind of what you're doing. You're selling your service and you're getting a commission based on that. How does that work for pay?
Depends on the project. Before I became a union member, before I was in SAG, you'd get paid cash sometimes at the end of the day when you finish filming. Sometimes you wouldn't even get money. Sometimes it would be just for food and travel expenses, depending on what kind of a project that you were cast in. And when you're starting out as an actor, you'll take anything. Hey, you're going to give me a Subway sandwich for lunch and give me $20 for gas to get to the location. I'm good to go, right? But once you get into the union acting, it's a process. Sometimes you don't see your check for a month because the production company they'll pay your agent. They send the check to your agent, and then your agent has up to 30 days to cut a check and send it to you. So depending on the relationship you have with your agent and depending on how good your agent is, I've been with some agents that I'd get paid in 2 weeks because the production company would pay them and then they would turn around and pay me. And then I've been with an agent where I'd have to call them and say, hey, listen, I did this project, 60 days ago. I haven't been paid on it yet. When am I going to get paid? And so then it's their job to either hunt down the money, or if they've already gotten the check, it's their job to get it out to you. So it can, who knows, And as far as residuals go, they just come in when they come in. You could go insane trying to find out when and where your residuals are going to come from. So you just kind of let that, and that always goes through SAG. Residuals go to the SAG office, and then the SAG office will cut a check and or not cut a check, but they'll record it in their banks or in their records, and then they'll send it out to your agent, and then your agent will send it to you. So I mean, residuals could take months to finally get to you.
So it's pretty safe to say that it's not for the lighthearted. You're gonna have to work hard at first, and you're gonna have to probably find a job in between work when you don't have it, right?
Yeah. Either if you're single, you better have a job lined up, and that's why a lot of these actors they'll be waiters, they'll be like I was a painter. I painted for a long time in between jobs because you can come and go from these jobs. They're jobs that have flexibility. And if you don't have a day job that is extremely flexible, you're going to have serious, serious conflicts. I mean, even when I was working at Universal Studios, I was under contract with the studios, and it was really difficult to get out on auditions because you would have to get a call from your agent. You got an audition tomorrow at 2 p.m. And then you're sitting there going, oh gosh, I got a shift tomorrow at Universal's. I'm doing some shows. And then that's when you turn around and you run around to all your fellow actors. Hey, can you cover my shift for me? And I'll cover yours. And, that's when you work with other actors in the industry. If you've got a job like the one I had at Universal, and you sort of help each other out. But if you're single, you find a job that pays you well, and you find a job that either you're the boss on or your boss is very flexible with you and understands, hey, you could have to leave at a moment's notice to go do an audition. And then the other thing is, if you're married, you make sure your spouse has got a nice, stable, good 9-to-5 job. Which
Yeah.
I was blessed. I was blessed most of my acting out here in California. My wife was a real estate agent, and she sold new homes. So she had a very nice, stable job, which allowed me, the flexibility to either have part-time work, or I was a stay-at-home dad. I actually took my kids on auditions. So there's many ways to sort of combat it, but basically you better be able to do a lot of things good.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest message that people need to understand is that it's not an easy thing to create that success in. You're going to have to be willing to put in the work. It is one of those things that you can do, but it is going to take more time, and it's going to take a lot of effort on your part. I think that some people think that they're just going to become famous right away because you have all these little viral things that can happen on YouTube, or, TikTok's a new one now too, where people are going viral. But that's like one in a million. The other people had to bust their butt to get what they were looking for.
Yeah, times are changing, Wes. It's anybody could make a lot of money on the social media circuit. It's insane. The next generation of movie watchers, or how shall I say it, content watchers, their attention span is shrinking. and you're seeing a lot more. It's because of these social influencers. They get out and they film themselves, leaning off of the edges of cliffs, doing outrageous stunts, or just the cinematography that they create within their 10-second, 20-second video. And people are gravitating towards that, and they're sitting there behind their computer and they're saying, I can do that too. And
Right.
it's I'm not saying that there's not talented people that are on the internet or on social media. It's just that because of it, anybody can make their own film. It's Anybody can make their own content and put it out there. And if a large audience likes it, you're going to get sponsors, you're going to get influential people that want to financially back you for other projects. It's Everybody is out there to get recognition. And like I said, social media, Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and YouTube, they've all created platforms for anybody to be seen by everybody.
Right. Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, like I said, you see that, and it kind of is sad for the people like you who work hard, in practicing that craft for someone just to get on there and do a 10-second dance or whatever, and then all of a sudden, boom, everyone's watching them.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting dynamic.
Well, if you're not willing to suck it up and adapt, then yeah, it is a difficult position for myself as an actor. You have to adapt. I mean, I grew this beard last year because I have had to. I decided I'm making a physical change in my appearance to open myself up to more opportunities as an actor. And my wife said, "Hey, not a lot of people can have this look that you're creating. So basically, what you try to do is you pull yourself out of this big, gigantic pool of people, and you relocate yourself into a smaller pool that you have more opportunities." So yeah, you have to constantly be reinventing yourself. When I was young and I first started out, I was getting all of these nerdy characters, all these feeble-minded, nerdy kind of geek-like characters. And as I've gotten older, and as I've lost my hair, and as I've aged and changed, my physical appearance has changed, I've been able to take on different roles, more dramatic roles. I did an NBC pilot called Awake, starring Jason Isaacs, and they cast me as a role of a pedophile teacher, and I never would have played a
Okay.
role like that ever in my younger days. It just these characters that have more depth, and so yeah, you've got to be constantly evolving and changing just to make yourself interesting and relevant, because it's fleeting like that. You can in an instant you can become just a ghost. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So obviously, growing the beard, growing the mustache, there's kind of probably. I'm assuming that you're probably looking for Western roles, maybe biker type roles or things like that. Is that kind of what you're where what the future holds for you, or the kind of um, movies and shows and things like that you're pursuing now?
yeah. That's exactly what I am. With this pandemic, Hollywood shut down for a year basically, and a lot of actors, including myself, lost their agents. I lost mine, lost my agent, and I sat back and I said, "Well, is this going to be sort of the end of the road? Am I, But I discussed it, talked it over with my wife, and it's a transition stage. So yeah, I did. I said, I've got it. Let's create a whole new look for me as an actor and put that out there. So we started watching a lot of the Netflix series and stuff that was streaming on all of these platforms, and we got involved watching Outlander. And I said to myself, "Boy, I'd love to be in a period piece like that." And my wife said, you should start creating a look that can get you opened through a door." And I said, "Great." And as the months went on, we started watching more stuff. And uh, Yellowstone, it's like my favorite Western to watch right now. And I just said, "Oh boy, I'd love to get on that show. That would be a great show to get into." So yeah, what you have to do is you have to start carving out a look. And then the other biggest problem is you've got to get that look back out there. So I am. I'm still looking for an agent, you know? So this is the way to do it. You get out on social media, you start putting everything out there and see what comes back.
Yeah, and I have to say, I saw your post that you kind of talked about Yellowstone on Instagram the other day, and I was like, yeah, you fit that. I mean, it's one of those things you could walk right into to a Western movie with what you got going on right now and fit right in. So,
Yeah.
how do you see this kind of shaping up right now with COVID? Because I feel like it's kind of at its wit's end, right? It's kind of getting to the point where it needs to stop, or people are starting to move into working again when they weren't before.
I think the reality is going to hit everybody that it's COVID. It's not going to go away. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. Next year, it's going to be another strand. And I don't want to sit here and compare it exactly to the flu, but it's kind of the same animal. You have something that's out there that's highly contagious. I mean, the flu is highly contagious, and well, I don't want to say it's less deadly because anybody that's got pre-existing conditions, you know, since the flu was basically came around, people die from that all the time. They don't die from the flu; they die from pneumonia, and that's basically what's happening with COVID too. People are dying from extreme acute pneumonia, and the problem with this virus, though, is this virus tracks extremely fast. So what's going to happen is we have to catch up to it and get ahead of it. And I think you're going to see sort of a numbingness happen over the next couple of years. You're going to see people saying, okay, you know what? We're going to have to exist with COVID. These are the protocols we're going to put in place. You combine that with the vaccines, and the vaccines are going to continue to get exponentially better every year. And then, something else is going to come and something else is going to take its place. And it's going to fall down the ladder with the flu, and it'll just be something that we have to deal with every year. It's not going away. It's not. It's out there. It's in the lives of everybody. I mean, how many years have all these other diseases been around, and they're still out there? Chicken pox and measles and mumps. I mean, they've been suppressed extremely by vaccines, and they've been controlled, but they flare up every once in a while. And I expect that to happen with COVID. But in the film industry, we're just going to have to learn how to perfect a protocol, and I think not act as knee jerk like when something happens. That I think is really what's got to happen. There's going to be a flattening. There's going to be an adjustment, and then once that happens, everything's going to kick back into gear. So.
Well, I hope that you are able to get back to work soon. And it's kind of disheartening that, you lose your agent and all those things because they just don't know what they're going to do. I see a lot of big transitioning going to these streaming services, and it seems like they're going to start releasing movies instead of in the theater on a streaming service. Like Justice League is a big one that's going to be coming out, and they're going to be putting it all streaming. They did Wonder Woman on streaming. These big movies are trying to transition because they have to. So hopefully you can get back at it soon, and I'm sure that you're not just hanging out. You don't seem like that type of person. You're probably writing something and probably going to continue to push to get those roles that you desire to have.
Yeah, it's all about getting somebody somewhere to say, "Hey, come on in. Let's read you for this role," or even an agent. Hey, I don't have a guy on my roster who's got such an epic beard look as you. That's your age, and that's another thing. I turned to my wife and I said, this is what I've got going for me. I says, the longest I stay into this business, the less competition I'm going to have, because the older you get, sooner or later, actors, we die too, I said, all I have to do is just outlive them all. I said, if I outlive them all, I could really hit my stride when I'm about 80. I said, then they'll want me for everything.
Yep. It's one of those games you got to play, right?
Yeah, and you do. You have to be loose about it. You have to be thick-skinned about it, and you have to you just have to keep banging on doors. The relentless are the ones that end up breaking through. If you're just relentless about it, you will eventually find the avenue. The door will eventually open, and then you'll be there. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to, kind of explain what you've done and where you're at and help open the eyes to people who are thinking about probably going into acting as a career so that they understand that it's not real easy to get to, but if you're willing to work for it, you can make it happen.
Yeah,
If
you got to have a plan.
if someone is trying to reach, yep, exactly. And so hopefully that's what this is, a blueprint to help those people have that plan and figure that out. If someone wanted to talk to you about your process and things like that, is there a way to find you? Are you easy to access? Can they get a hold of you in any way?
Instagram is usually the platform that I like to use and I'm most involved with. And you can find me at the Timothy Mac and follow me on Instagram. I'll give you a follow back. I'm usually good about that. And then you can turn around and message me there, comment on some of my posts, and ask a question about it. I've got a lot of posts that I've posted for me either on set or maybe a project I've done, and as well as a lot of other just personal, like either headshots or stuff like that. But yeah, Instagram's a great place if you want to see what I'm doing. IMDb is a good place to see. I'd say about 80% of the projects that I do show up there. There's a lot of projects I do that don't even get on IMDb, but you can follow me there, and that is imdb.me/Timothy McLaughlin, and you can see what projects I'm working on. Other social media platforms, yeah, I'm on Facebook. I have a lot of friends on Facebook, family on Facebook, high school people that I connect with. Yeah, you shoot me a friend request if you want on Facebook. I'm not there a lot. I don't live on social media as much. And Twitter is just I got off of Twitter. There was too much noise on Twitter, and I'm not one of those combative type of people, and so I just said, you know what, I need more positive platforms to put myself on. So and LinkedIn, by the way, I had a LinkedIn account, and I'm starting to get more involved in my LinkedIn. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Timothy McLaughlin. Yeah, just find me there.
Yep, and he does have some great pictures. If you haven't checked him out on Instagram, I'll make sure that I link everything in the show notes so that you can find Timothy pretty easily. Hey, before we go, we have one last question that I ask every single guest, and it's one of those things that's pretty important that people understand that success is different for every single individual. That's why the show is called Shaping Success. So that question that I always ask is, what is the shape of your success? How would you define success for yourself?
Well, it's certainly not money. Success is definitely, some people think success is money driven. Not for me. Success is driven by goals and accomplishments along the way. And personally, I have never considered myself to be a success. I consider myself to always be pushing to be successful. And then once I've done something, I turn my attention to try to be successful at something else. So it's always a constant reach. You're always trying to reach for something. And then eventually at a point, you turn around, you look back and you say, okay, well, I was successful at this project. I was successful at this point in my life. I wasn't successful at this point in my life. And you sit there and you do a self-evaluation. And then you redirect yourself to be successful at other things. I think success is an ongoing journey, Wes. It's something that I don't think is always attainable. But as long as you're always striving towards success, I think that's for other people to determine, hey, this guy's really successful at what he does. And it's not for me to decide whether I'm successful at it. It's for me to decide whether I'm happy at it and whether I'm continuing to do what I love. So success is something I think is for other people to decide on.
I think that's a great definition of it, and I'm excited to hear that because, again, setting those goals and trying to reach those always has little mile markers in between. So always trying to hit that little mile marker to get to the big, the end result, to the actual, it's like going to a city. I'm 50 miles away. I'm going to hit each mile marker as a goal in between there. So that's the way that that I like to look at it as well.
Yeah, and you're right. And sometimes you could you can hit that 1 mile marker, and something can happen during that mile marker that could take you off the highway. and it can take you off in another direction to pursue something else. So yeah, I mean, you set a big goal for yourself, but along the way, there's going to be forks in the road. There's going to be other opportunities, and I've known actors that have pursued and relentlessly and have turned around and have ended up in completely different end games, completely different successful careers. So yeah,
Yep.
it's an unknown.
It's all about that happiness that you're trying to pursue.
It's exactly what it is. Be happy in what you do. And if you're not happy in what you do, then you need to find something else that's going to make you happy.
Right. Well, Timothy, I want to say thank you for taking the time, and I know we had a little bit of a late start. I appreciate you being patient with that. I'm really excited to get this out and kind of help my audience find that success in acting if that's what they want to do, or writing, or anything like that. And I'll make sure to direct them towards you if you have any questions.
Hey, appreciate that, Wes. Been a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
all right,
take
everyone.
care.
That's the end of the show. Yep. You too. All right, everyone. That's the end of the show. I wanted to say thank you for tuning in. Again, I want to challenge you to find the shape of your success. See you next time.